Is our generation weaker than previous generations? Think about it. Living standards are almost universally better. We have access to more information, more entertainment, better healthcare. Parents are more loving and more informed to raise children compared to previous generations in general. Yet, studies find that we are somehow mentally messed up more by an exponentially high degree. Suicide rates and mental illnesses more prominent than the previous generation by a seriously high margin. We can attribute this all to social media, or different sociological or economic circumstances of our time. However, this argument relies on the assumption that we had it worse, which, upon reflection of our parents' generation, hell nah. Everything seems to point that our generation is just weaker, less resilient, because the struggles and pain our parents and their parents had to endure are exponentially more, yet it seems they are happier and have way less mental issues than us. Let me show you what they had to deal with compared to us. Here's an illustration of the previous generations' personal experience on average.
Остались наверху, заебись вообще, блин. Да ты чё?
Dave, born in 1969, who was raised in poverty's crevice village, survives daily off of cockroaches they find in the basement of their 2 feet wide shack. Dave makes it to school every day by going to the cannibal monkeys of Regret Hollow Forest, while fighting off baboon hawks from Lethal Company with nail clippers. Before Dave goes to sleep in poverty's last salvation cave, he reminds himself that every day he pushes through just so that one day he can have a family and make them happier than he was. With no university degree and the capital stock he found of a $2 bill guarded by a 1,000-pound grizzly bear he had to fight to receive in the cannibal monkeys of Regret Hollow Forest, he uses the money to create his own independent business. After failing 22 consecutive businesses with no money, food, and love, he sells his third liver to create and succeed in his own business at the age of 18. Dave then finds a wife, which he promises to love unconditionally, and has a house he wishes to raise his future children in the age of 20. Then comes us. Dave and wife have a kid. Kid has loving parents who are attentive and unconditionally present. He is woken up and surprised by a brand new Nintendo Galaxian Deluxe 4 console with 300 games already installed, and is sent to Celestial Springs School for Purposeful Nurturing and Gentle Achievement, where every syllabus is custom made based on the students' astrological birth chart and attachment style. Kid, at the age of 20, ends up having no hopes and dreams, no bitches, has 27 different autoimmune diseases due to extreme depressive episodes, and bro doesn't even have Spotify Premium. Okay, perhaps this vision is slightly exaggerated, but doesn't this sound somewhat true? Our parents went through the same, if not more struggles than us, having much less capital and ideas to work with, yet it can be argued that our generation is performing worse economically. According to a report from New America and Young Invincibles, median earnings for US millennials aged roughly 18 to 34 were 20% lower than those of baby boomers at the same age. Despite higher education levels, nearly 40% of millennials 25 to 37 hold a bachelor's degree compared to just about 25% of boomers at the same stage. This can very easily be correlated with more complicated and globalized economy, but at the same time, the epidemic of mental illnesses, dopaminergic social media and technology addictions, increasing suicide rates, all seem to point to somewhere else. And I am not convinced that it is because our generation is weaker or less resilient. I think those are the remarks of a generation built upon suppressing their feelings in environments where it was institutionally normalized to numb emotions and normalize a lack of empathy to survive. We are simply cracks in the armors of a world manufactured to live without basic human needs being attended to, and we are led to believe we are weak because our parents struggled to interpret natural adaptations to our circumstances as anything but a lack of grit. Now, to let the pain of generations of suppressed human needs in the midst of universal human suffering and continuing cycles of imposed human traumas, I want to help decipher why we have a rise in mental illness and suicide rates, why we as a generation seem weaker. Unsurprisingly, there's a lot of research in academia and studies that have tried to answer the question of why this generation seems to exhibit much greater mental illness, suicide rates, and addiction. I have reviewed this literature and have connected all of their answers to a certain thesis on why this generation seems weaker. However, I can only give the answer I have found if I carry you through what findings research has come to find on this topic. So, let's go at it. Firstly, Jonathan Haidt's recent book, The Anxious Generation: How the Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness, presents the following central argument. This generation is mentally unwell because we replaced play-based childhood with phone-based childhood. Haidt argues that sometime around 2010, we crossed an invisible line. Childhood, once built on unsupervised outdoor play, face-to-face interaction, and gradual exposure to real-life risk and failure, was suddenly digitalized. Smartphones and social media became the dominant form of socialization and emotional regulation. So, what changed as a result of our childhood being centered around phones rather than natural play? He shows that rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide began to skyrocket around that same time that smartphones use became universal, especially among Gen Z girls. Especially media apps like Instagram created hyper-curated identity ecosystems that constantly exposed users to judgment, comparison, and social exclusion. But why would being on our phones compared to natural play have such a profound effect on this generation's mental illness? How does the book even explain how being on our phones causes us to be so weak? Well, it is argued based on our biological and evolutionary traits that children need physical interaction, gradual identity formation, and stress inoculation of real-world challenge. Without that, they fail to build a psychological immune system that helped them tolerate the stress. In its place, they get dopamine loops, shallow sociality, and endless surveillance, leading to anxiety, disassociation, and a profound fragility in identity. Okay, so then the book argues that by deviating from natural play settings which make us develop a strong sense of identity and make us feel with stress better, we became less tolerant to stressful settings, prompting higher rates of mental illness and other factors that contribute to this that make our identities fragile, like constant comparison and internet cultures. Then, to put it simply, the mind adapts to its environment, and in a phone-based environment, the mind adapts by breaking down. Haidt's argument is not moralistic, it's evolutionary. We are a species wired for embodied connection, not fragmented attention, and the data speaks for itself. Teen depression has more than doubled since 2010. Emergency room visits for self-harm among teen girls skyrocketed by 188%. The biggest increases are found in the most socially plugged-in youth. So, the answer to the question of why there is a surge in mental illnesses with this generation is because the central components required for a child to develop a healthy psyche is invariably distorted by the digitalization of play, which is an essential function our body needs to develop in relation to others to learn, explore, and build a healthy emotional basis for how a person perceives everything. But then, why does this answer feel so dissatisfactory in isolation? Am I really supposed to be satisfied with the answer that the existence of social media is what causes us to collectively be worse off? Previous generations have been able to build families and businesses off of nothing with seemingly very little no play as well. Their emotion regulation may have been built in more natural settings and in relation to people, sure, but they barely were recognized, and I'm sure they had next to no one regulating their development most of the time. No. There must be a deeper variable to play here, a deeper truth about how humans react to some central need not being met. We must have been deprived in some deeper way if we became so obsessed with social media in the first place. No, we're not addicted to social media. I know what this is. We're addicted to relief from pain. Let me explain. Gabor Mate, in his book, Scattered Minds, The Origins and Healing of Attention Deficit Disorder, has the following central thesis. Addiction is not a choice or a weakness. It is a response to unresolved emotional pain, often rooted in childhood attachment wounds. According to Gabor Mate, the real question isn't what are we addicted to, but rather, what pain are we trying to escape? In Scattered Minds, Mate explains ADHD not as a fixed genetic disorder, but as a developmental adaptation. Yes, it is argued that ADHD is indeed not something that is gotten from birth, but rather a consequence of certain needs not being met and the body simply adapting to it. He argues that children who grow up in environments where they are not fully seen, attuned to, or emotionally held, especially in early infancy and childhood, begin to disassociate and disconnect as a coping mechanism. Over time, that becomes their default way of being. Scattered attention, emotional volatility, chronic restlessness. This is the ADHD he describes. Not a disease, but a survival adaptation, as the last attempt to maintain what our homeostatic imperatives are built to do, to ensure sufficient amount of attachment and authenticity is received. When these cannot be fully provided, when attention and a feeling of being seen is not given to the child to learn everything, the child cannot be attended to for every emotional situation. They adapt by developing a chronic need to reach as high stimuli input as possible. Trauma is not a matter of a big, large event. It is simply any deviation from the needs of the body forms subconscious responses to maintain. So something as little as a child not being attended to when they want to make sense of the world, their emotions, being ensured on how to understand their internal world, how to respond to their emotions, they, in a desperate attempt to live despite these needs not being fulfilled, develop this chronic need for attention. ADHD is especially relevant with more extreme degrees of emotional invalidation and scolding, because if the child has no grounds through which any of their actions are approved or explained, then they develop the subconscious response to latch onto any means of stimuli that deviates from the inability to have emotional validation. Simply, if something hurts or cannot be attended to, the mind learns to live without it. Without us even knowing what is going on internally, it becomes our unquestionable reality. So, with all of that and my constant rambling, I will give my central thesis from everything I've researched and observed from our generation and those that came prior. We don't have more mental illness and higher suicide rates because we're weaker. We are simply the first generation raised in an environment that left our core emotional needs unmet, while simultaneously telling us that everything should be fine. We have suffered through the collective trauma of not being attended to or make our emotions, internal worlds make sense to all of us in our own ways. Whether it was a parent not caring or not knowing enough to be there to emotionally regulate or make sense of something when we have been down, or a lack of help that came when we were confused, judgment for being us or thinking or feeling the way we do, we have all collectively learned to suppress and adapt to things we need to receive in order to be emotionally healthy individuals. And these are not just minor inconveniences. Our literal biological imperatives are built upon the assumption that we will have attendees that make us make sense of the world, of our minds, of our place and meaning, and every moment of this being neglected or unseen is, as little as it may seem, traumas. And in comparison to other generations who do not even have the chance to process their feelings or thoughts, our sense of reality has seriously been distorted. Whereas with our parents, their reality was universally shared as work, do not think so much, just focus on power, happiness, success. With everyone binding them to this to get any form of attachment, our generation, whenever they have been unseen or attempted to process something, have had the time to reflect, and despite this, to be unable to find anyone to voice their thoughts or feelings with. So with no concrete form of reality or emotional grounding, and no one to sustainably voice it, we latch onto a range of adaptations, whether it is dopaminergic addictions to escape reality and detach from emotions, or the isolation of the mind that twists our sense of attachment, born out of a desperate need to be heard and seen when nothing does. So, it is exactly because wherever we have felt something was off, we did not feel right, we have been neglected for it and told, you're just too sensitive, you have it so easy, everyone goes through that we, as a generation, have shown to exhibit greater mental illness and suicide tendencies than any other generation. These heightened rates are not indication of a weaker generation of humans. It is indication of a world that has left our generation deprived, gaslighted us into believing that everything is fine, then told us to function normally. Now, all of this is not to blame previous generations or social media. I think our place within the timeline of humanity is very, very interesting and important. Because so many times I am tempted to say, Are we a mistake? If so many things are bearing upon us and there is barely any space to voice our needs or have it, if we could not connect yet see all the problems, should we not have existed in the first place at all? I question if we are so weak, knowing the reasons don't help. Perhaps we're the biggest failures of this generation and of humanity. Do not get offended, by the way. These are simply what I think about myself at times in my spirals, but I do not believe those words anymore. I do not believe we're weaker. You see, a very close friend of mine has once told me that everything happens for a reason, and I believe him. Because all of the unattended voices, generations of suffering and adaptations to artificial circumstances of unsatisfactory attachment and authenticity show something very crucial. All of this shows what we actually need. The world is filled with problems that are screaming at us to see the causes until it cannot be ignored. We need connections, where we can voice anything, where we will be accepted for just being us. And our ways of trying to make sense of things and explore will not be rejected or dismissed, but instead held. That's how it's been supposed to be, but it's been neglected, and every single generation has suffered the consequences, but we have suffered it the greater, it seems, and that is why our generation is seen as weaker. So, do I think we are weaker as a generation after all of this? No. I think Dave can go suck it if he thinks his child is spoiled. I think everyone watching this should continue living, for all of you matters. Go make the unseen seen and connect. You've got this.